Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gisela Kwok, and I am the Director of the Provincial Disability Supports Initiative branch with Alberta Human Services. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Employment First webcast, part of a monthly series of webcasts on employment for persons with disabilities. Our topic today is increasing employment among young people with disabilities. We're excited to have three presentations today from very different organizations: Inclusion Alberta, formerly Alberta Association for Community Living, the Cine Family Foundation, and Grant MacEwan University. They each will share how they're working to improve career opportunities for youth with disabilities. As you watch the presentations by yourself or with your family, friends, or colleagues, please share your thoughts or questions via the live chat window. Our online moderator, Tina Faith, and she will pose your questions to our guests at the end of their presentations. Also know that today's session is being recorded and the video will be posted on the Alberta Employment First website. Our first presentation is by Inclusion Alberta, formerly known as Alberta Association for Community Living. Trish Bowman and Wendy McDonald are here to share their experiences about the Youth Employment Partnership. Trish Bowman is the Executive Director of Community Development at Inclusion Alberta. She has worked extensively in inclusive post-secondary education for over 25 years, creating opportunities for students with developmental disabilities to be fully included in regular programs of study and develop career path. Recently, she has been involved in the development of the Youth Employment Partnership, an initiative that creates opportunities for youth with disabilities to gain valuable experience. Wendy McDonald is an accomplished trainer and adult educator with over 25 years of experience in staff training and leadership development. She is currently Development Director for Inclusion Alberta. Wendy has been a Rotarian for 24 years and is a past president of the Rotary Club of Edmonton Mayfield. Wendy is also a past president of the Alberta Association for Community Living. As a board member for ACL, Wendy was successful in co-founding a project to create employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities by creating a partnership between the association, Rotary clubs, and the Alberta Human Services. Wendy and her husband Blaine have 2 sons. Please share your thoughts and questions for Wendy and Trish via the live chat window. Tina will pose your questions at the end of their presentations.
Thanks very much, Gisela. It's really our pleasure to be here this afternoon to talk about a project that we're really excited about at Inclusion Alberta. I'll start by sharing a little bit about our association. We're a provincial advocacy organization that will be 60 years old next year. And really, we are an organization that supports individuals and their families to have a good life and community. And so we really believe that to have a good life, that individuals with disabilities need to follow the same pathway that people without disabilities do. So that would start for us in thinking about inclusive recreation, inclusive education, and of course for inclusive employment. So we know what leads to a good life is following the same trajectory and pathways for those people that don't have disabilities. And there's a body of experience that tells us that those with the opportunity to follow traditional pathways are going to have a better outcome in terms of their adult life with a developmental disability. So what this means when we think about it for all of us is that we want what the rest of us would consider maybe ordinary to be the experience for somebody with a developmental disability. So being included in your neighborhood school, in a regular classroom, having friends, playing recreational soccer or baseball, or being part of any community league team, taking swim lessons, maybe joining Girl Guides or Scouts, having a part-time job in high school, going on to post-secondary if that's what the person chooses, being part of a faith community or any other community association getting a job, getting married, owning a home. It really is about belonging to community. It is around being part of community that is going to ensure that as an adult, individuals with developmental disabilities will have a good life. And that really is the premise for the Youth Employment Project that we are going to share with you today.
Next slide. So, the Youth Employment Partnership is really the reintroduction of an initiative that was developed in Alberta in the mid-1990s as a means of addressing the difficulty that youth with developmental disabilities have in obtaining part-time employment while in school. For many young people, part-time employment while they're in school is a very common, valuable experience where they take those important first steps in learning what it means to have a job. So showing up on time, being part of a team, being reliable or dependable, learning what you like to do and what you don't like to do, learning what you're good at and stretching yourself. Students or young people also learn the benefits of having a paycheck and some money of their own. And for lots of kids, it's really that first sort of step outside of the influence of your parents. So starting to create some independence from your parents. But part-time employment for youth with developmental disabilities has been largely absent. Many young people with developmental disabilities reach adulthood without ever having had any of those first experiences as an employee. One of the things we know that is a significant predictor of employment as an adult is having had employment as a youth, and that's true for all of us. And when it comes to adults with developmental disabilities, the research shows that, in fact, paid work during the high school years has consistently been shown to be the strongest predictor of success as employment as an adult, regardless of the disability label or the intensity of supports you received in school or in life. So, as mentioned, the Youth Employment Partnership is a model that was developed in Calgary in 1995 by Julie Allen, who then partnered with the Alberta Association for Community Living in 1998 to bring the partnership to Edmonton. It was also successfully implemented in the United Kingdom in the 2000s. The success of the model was never in question. But in Alberta, it's always been plagued by not fitting. It's not fit our funding model. So FSCD didn't fund employment supports for youth. PDD didn't fund children. Employment didn't fund employment supports for people with disabilities. So it didn't seem to fit anywhere, and as a result, the funding ended and we weren't able to sustain the project. With the creation of the Ministry of Human Services and the provision of supports and services falling under the Disability Services, the opportunity to implement the project reemerged, and we began in the latter part of 2013 in Edmonton and in January of this year in Calgary. So, how it works. The Youth Employment Partnership is very much about partnerships. We establish partnerships with schools, with businesses, with youth with disabilities and their families, and with peer mentors. Youth with disabilities are supported to obtain part-time employment after school and on weekends, like anyone else, in jobs that are based on their interests and abilities. They're matched with youth without disabilities who provide the on-the-job support as required. We've established relationships with schools in both Edmonton and Calgary who assist us in identifying youth with disabilities that might be interested in obtaining work, as well as identifying youth without disabilities who might be interested in working as a peer mentor. The Youth Employment Partnership is responsible for generating those employment opportunities, so we partner with the business community. And they're typically those sort of first-time jobs, so largely in the retail business, hospitality industry, the sorts of places, fast food, that all young people get those first jobs. And part of the role is really helping those employers to understand the value of employing a youth with a disability and how it contributes to the overall success of their business. The employers hire and provide the wages to the youth with disabilities, and Inclusion Alberta hires and provides this supervision, support, and training to the youth without disabilities, or peer mentors. We, of course, need to be in partnership with the youth with disabilities and their families. We know families know their sons and daughters best, often have lots of ideas about what will work best for them, what sorts of employment sites might work best for them. And we also know that lots of us got our first jobs through our families. So we also really partner with the families to think about who do they know, what's their network, and how do we tap into that for that first job. The research also shows that a significant predictor of employment as a youth is the family's expectation of that. So really working with families to help them understand how this can work and how it can be successful is a really important piece of raising the bar and raising the expectations. And last but not least, we partner with the Youth Without Disabilities, or the peer mentors. One of the reasons youth with disabilities have struggled to enter the workforce and to be successful is that they often need some accommodations in the workplace, extended training times, and support on the job to be successful. So a critical component of the partnership is how to provide that support in the best way possible. And in the Youth Employment Partnership, we do that through peer mentors. So same-aged youth who are given the support to figure out how to support a fellow youth to be successful in the workplace. The peer mentors are provided with orientation and training, and then they're matched with the youth with a disability to provide that on-the-job support. By utilizing peer support and fading it to the degree possible, the process of inclusion in the workplace is far more natural. Youth without disabilities are in a much better position to understand the culture of that age group, of how kids connect socially, of the technology that kids use. So they're a much more natural fit in facilitating the social inclusion in the workplace. They also are far more familiar with the job expectations because these are the same jobs that they've had and their friends have. So their ability to really support someone to be successful is much greater, we feel, than an adult coming in.
So the key principles of the Youth Employment Partnership are about those normative pathways that I talked about earlier, and they really are the guiding principles through all of this work. And so we talk about thinking about career development, job development to families when their kids are little. So the whole question of what do you want to be when you grow up should be asked of kids with disabilities in early years, just as it is asked of those without disabilities. And we want families and individuals to have the expectation that when they reach high school age, they are going to have a job, and it is going to look normative like it is for their peers. And almost what we would hope for is that there would be an expectation, actually, that that would be the experience. So we think about, in the Youth Employment Partnership, what works well for youth. In doing that, we think about what are the cycles of being a high school student. How do kids communicate? Well, they text and they use technology to do that communication. So both with the youth with disabilities and the peer mentors, we really think about the rhythm of the high school experience, how kids connect with each other, and even with employers. I have a son who works at a store, and he gets his schedule through an app. So it really is, as we work with youth, we really have to think about what's going to work for them. And the peer mentors are really helpful for keeping us on track in terms of what would be the right thing to do in terms of communication. So we really focus and talk a lot to families and the individuals about that normative pathway and experiences. Relationship development is really key. So not only the relationship that we have with schools in terms of looking for the youth that are looking for work, but also with those peer mentors. And it also provides an opportunity for us in working with the schools to really talk about how important employment is for young adults with developmental disabilities, and the huge outcome that we are going to have a better result in adult life if we've had the opportunity for paid employment in high school. We've really discovered that through the Youth Employment Partnership that it's like for many areas of our world, true partnership is about being in real relationship. So we really do listen, respond to feedback, we learn together, we learn to trust each other, and the youth with developmental disabilities and their peer mentors really develop strong relationships. And some of those have carried on into be friendships outside of work, but they really have a great trusting relationship in order to be able to provide that support. And so we are going to continue to, we believe, follow this path. Tricia's going to talk a little bit about the results that we've had since we've started, but we're really excited about using this model and the outcomes that we're experiencing.
So quickly, some of the outcomes to date are we in Edmonton have created 11 jobs and we have 5 peer mentors. In Calgary, we have 2 jobs and 2 peer mentors. Youth are working in a variety of jobs, as I described earlier. They're working at Tim Hortons and in restaurants and in retail stores, golf courses in the summer, those sorts of places. We've had lots of the typical challenges that anybody has with those first jobs. Someone tries a shift, hates it, won't go back. We have to start at square one again, but those are the typical sort of experiences of youth, so we see that as quite normative and certainly not a failure, but part of the success.
We had to learn that.
We did.
We had to recognize
Someone had
that
to
that
remind
was
us that that's pretty normal.
somebody had to remind us that that was pretty typical.
Yeah. We've also had an employer who's part of a franchise who has created the opportunity for us to speak at a franchise owners meeting because it's been such a positive experience. So it's really about now trying to work that business community as well. And I think one of the most exciting outcomes that we've seen is the youth without disabilities are starting to become real advocates for inclusion. So as they start to learn more about this and see their fellow youth having the same dreams and aspirations as they do, they start to also see some of the other inequities and want to do something about it. So some of those peer mentors have actually become leaders in Inclusion Alberta's youth wing and are trying to think about how they might take up the issue of helping their friends to be fully included in community in other ways. So we really think that some of those outcomes, in fact, are some of the most significant outcomes.
Now, there's actually some questions for you two, if you don't mind me interrupting. Melanie's asking how does she as an employer make herself available to working with youth who have disabilities?
Email us.
Yeah, call us.
Absolutely, we'd be really interested in
So you're looking for more employers?
Absolutely.
We are, absolutely. We are looking for more employers. So the email address is, say it? Okay, sorry. W. McDonald, that's McDonald, @inclusionalberta.org. And we'd be happy to speak to any employer who would like to have the conversation.
That's wonderful. We'll put it in the web chat too. Jackie's asking if this partnership extends to other communities such as Cochrane.
Cochrane?
Cochrane?
Maybe.
Well, it doesn't at the moment, but Cochrane's pretty close to Calgary,
Right.
and we did start a youth employment project in Calgary in January. Okay. So we would absolutely be interested in having a conversation.
A couple more for you. How are the peer mentors recruited?
So what we've done is partner with schools. So in working with some of the administration in schools, we've asked them, because it's their school. So we say, how do we best, do that in your school? And different schools have different ideas. So there are youth groups, there are leadership groups in schools. Some schools have things like called Global Cafe. So they've actually approached students that they feel would be a good fit and then made the connection for us. So really by working in partnership with schools.
Oh, that's wonderful. And the last question is, what are the incentives really to make employers want to hire someone with disability?
Sure. So the incentives are the same in the youth employment project as they would be in any inclusive employment initiative. So what we know about hiring individuals with disabilities is, and there's lots of research if people want to look at it, there's a solid business case for hiring individuals with developmental disabilities. But some of the things that we hear anecdotally repeatedly is the impact on the culture and the team as a result of having somebody who's actually really happy to be at work and enthusiastic every day. Employers will tell you it saves them money because in a lot of organizations, especially in those first-time jobs, there's a high turnover rate. So we talk to employers who will tell us they'll have an 80 to 90% turnover rate, but the individuals with developmental disabilities, not always, but when it fits, will stay for a significant period of time. So they can talk about the savings in staff training as a result of hiring somebody with a developmental disability.
And one more question quickly before we're running out of time is if the program's available in Fort McMurray?
Not at this
yet.
time.
Not
Not yet.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy and Trish. Our second presenter is from the Cine Family Foundation. Tom Collins will share about the Cine Family Foundation's new youth program, Community Works Canada, in partnership with Autism Speaks Canada. Tom Collins is the first president of the Cine Family Foundation. Tom is a founding member of the consulting practice Stratavera Partners and the business advisory practice at Conroy Ross Partners. Previously, Tom served as the Senior Vice President with 2 Canadian Pacific Limited companies and coordinated the merger that created Encana Energy. Earlier in his career, Tom served with the province of Alberta for 12 years. He has served on numerous community and charitable boards. Please share your thoughts and questions for Tom via the live chat window. Tina, again, will pose your questions at the end of their presentation. Tom.
Thank you, Gisela, and thanks for this opportunity to share some information and some of our experiences with the most challenging and difficult group of individuals with disabilities. And these are young people who have autism spectrum disorder. 15 years ago, we thought that perhaps it was 1 in every 10,000 babies being born would be diagnosed with ASD. Today, we know that it's actually 1 in every 68 children being born will receive that diagnosis. Because it affects little boys about 4 times more often than little girls, the diagnosis will be delivered to about 1 in every 50 little boys being born in Canada and 1 in every 90 little girls being born in Canada. It is a condition that is marked by social impairments, by some poor executive functioning in some cases, often communication challenges, and frequently sensory challenges. So if you are going to deal with a group of young people who are disabled, dealing with young people who have autism spectrum disorder represents the ultimate challenge. So our foundation was created in 2008. It was the result of a very significant donation by the Seneve family. We think it's probably the largest bequest ever made in Western Canada. So we're not in the fundraising business. We have carved a niche for ourselves in the world of autism, where we want to focus on uncovering the most promising practices that we can. Because it is such a challenging condition, as we know, many not-for-profits operate in silos, many doing really good work, but the opportunity for them to share their experiences tends to be quite limited. So we see ourselves as a catalyst, as an enabler, and one of the results of that has been the development of the Community Works program. So we're headquartered in Calgary, but we have a national presence, and you'll see in a moment the sort of scope of that presence that we're anticipating. We operate a demonstration site. It's 17,000 square feet in the Child Development Center in Calgary, right across from the Children's Hospital. We have 3 vocational labs and a fully furnished apartment. So when we think about young people with autism, we think that a good part of the research suggests we need to take a very comprehensive lifespan approach. So expecting that by the time young people are ready to take on the programs that Trish and Wendy are providing, many of the young people on the spectrum are already in a very deep social hole. They tend to be isolated. They're frequently bullied. So they're not, in many ways, the best candidates for the traditional kind of high school employment program. I want to share with you a little bit of information about what we're seeing. We have a partnership with the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. And we fund research on individuals who are on the spectrum. And the employment statistics for this particular group of people are pretty dismal. In 2012, only 17% of individuals with a diagnosis of ASD actually had paid employment. So 83% were unemployed. And the mean income for the 17% that were employed was $1,500 a year. Now, what does that mean? The Government of Canada tells us that we have about 800,000 Canadians with disabilities who are capable of working but are not. So 800,000 Canadians with disabilities capable of earning an income but not earning an income. At least 350,000 of those are individuals on the spectrum. So when we think about this, we think about beginning in late elementary school, beginning to work as young people go through junior high school. We all know what a group of 13-year-old boys and 13-year-old girls are like. And if you're a little different, boy, you can pay a price for that. In spite of the best efforts of the school systems, in spite of the best efforts of families, many young people, because they're different, end up being isolated. So we've partnered with organizations across North America to develop and to introduce programs that help with that social inclusion issue, that help them manage their anxiety. Many of the young people who are on the spectrum are very bright people. Some of our greatest inventors and scientists are individuals who today would have been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Different, odd, peculiar, but very gifted. So helping them understand how to make a friend, how to keep a friend, helping them understand how to manage their own anxieties, that's the role in junior high. And then in high school, similar to what Trish and Wendy are talking about, we are introducing Community Works Canada, which is a volunteer activity. It's a evidence-informed pre-employment program. We know that this particular program works. It has many of the same characteristics that Wendy and Trish were talking about, but it has some subtle differences too. So let me get into that. The program was developed at the Southwestern Autism Resource and Research Center in Phoenix, Arizona, called SARC for short. And the project is being funded by our foundation, by Autism Speaks Canada, by the federal government, and in partnership with SARC. So the program, again, depends on peer mentors, neurotypical peer mentors who have a special role in helping these young people succeed at their volunteer experiences. But it's, as you'll see in a minute, what underpins this is actually a very subtle clinical intervention. And that's what distinguishes it from many of the other volunteer programs that attempt to work with young people who have disabilities. So we are developing in Calgary, and we have the first enrollment of a group of individuals. We have 6 individuals, all in high school, all of whom are now volunteering on weekends and in evenings. They're supported by 6 neurotypical peer mentors and 3 clinical practitioners. So each session comes with its own set of goals. So being very purposeful about how do I make eye contact? How do I come to work appropriately dressed? How do I initiate a conversation? Every 30 minutes, we evaluate progress towards those particular goals, and the way in which the volunteer experiences are designed is intended to deliver that subtle clinical intervention so that in the background we're helping young people who have ASD begin to experience what it's like to be in an employment setting. Over the course of the next 4 years, we will not only have our national demonstration site in Calgary, but we will have 5 other centers across the country. We'll have one on the West Coast, one in the Maritimes, one in Quebec, one in Ontario, and one for the prairies. And as I mentioned, there is significant data collection involved. Our intention is to begin to deal with and support thousands of young people. I mentioned the statistics earlier about a diagnosis of 1 in 68. That means that there are 5,000 little babies being born in Canada every year who will be diagnosed with ASD. And the challenge that we've set ourselves to is how do we help that group, that big group, become as independent as they possibly can be as adults. So the program kicked off. We got our first funding on the 9th of February, and the program will run through until 2019. We have other programs that work in support of this, and I won't go into any detail, but I invite you to go on our website. It's www.theabilityhub.org, and check out some of the really interesting and fascinating things that our foundation is striving to do. So thank you.
Tom, I have a couple of questions actually that I wanted to ask you. So for the peer mentorship component, I mean, is pre-employment training, what does that really entail?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Well, is the approach needed for everyone that goes through the program is essentially to achieve success, right? So you see the point being that the volunteering is pre-employment?
Yes. Yes. It turns out that, and Trish and Wendy alluded to this, that the research indicates that for most of us, the most successful predictor of long-term job success are the experiences we had as teens.
Right.
And whether that's part-time work, whether that's volunteer work, the evidence doesn't really distinguish between them. But for many young people on the spectrum, expecting them to be able to work in paid employment immediately is not a realistic expectation. So we think that the evidence supports doing volunteer work in the community as a precursor to thinking about paid employment. And as these young people graduate out of high school and they get into the 18 to 25-year-old range, and if you think about our careers, that's when we went to school, we trained ourselves to participate in the workforce, we became more fully functioning members of society, and by the time we were 25, we were and are often independent of our parents. Well, young people with autism don't have those opportunities, so we need to create this much longer on-ramp for them so that by the time they're 30, there's every likelihood that they will be employed, and volunteering is part of that.
Right, thank you. I have a comment, another quick question for you. Actually, Melanie says that she just wanted to comment that as a mom with a son who has autism, she just wanted to thank you for what you're doing.
Oh.
So the last question for you, can you just talk a little bit about the relational model and why you think that's a good approach for youth?
So again, there's a tremendous amount of research around the impact that peer mentors have on individuals with disabilities. And I can tell you lots of cute stories about things that parents would struggle to have their young person do, and one or two words from a peer change the behavior. We had a young lady who she had some sensory issues and didn't like to brush her teeth. So we were sitting around at lunch one day, and we had a neurotypical peer there, and she was explaining that she only brushed her teeth once or twice a week. And this neurotypical peer said, "Gross." The next day I went into our apartment, and there she was, toothpaste all over the mirror, and it just took that one word to achieve something that her parents had been struggling with for two or 3 years prior to that. So the impact of those peer mentors on the lives of these young people is profound. And just as my colleagues were talking about, the research is there.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Very much, Tom. So our third presentation is from MacEwan University. Abigail Parrish-Craig and Juan Bui will share how their institution is supporting students in search of meaningful employment. Now let me introduce you to our speakers. Juan Bui is MacEwan University's Career Services Manager. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Alberta, along with a certificate in career development from Concordia University College of Alberta. As a certified career development professional, Huang enjoys mentoring and watching the professional and personal growth of not only the students she works with, but also her team. Her position allows her to help others build the confidence needed to pursue and challenge their career path. Abigail Parrish-Craig is Chair of Services of Students with Disabilities at MacEwan University. Abigail is a registered psychologist and leads the multidisciplinary services to students with disabilities team at MacEwan University. With more than 20 years experience in the field, Abigail continues to be motivated to facilitate accessibility in all aspects of the learning environment for students with disabilities through work with students and collaboration with colleagues within the university and the post-secondary system in Alberta. Again, please share your thoughts and questions for Abigail and Huang via the live chat window. Tina will pose your questions at the end of their presentations.
Well, Hoon and I are privileged to have been invited to participate in this panel discussion today. I would like to suggest that MacEwan's Services to Students with Disabilities approach to increasing employment for young people with disabilities is two-pronged. Number one, my primary role is to facilitate opportunities for students with disabilities to attain a post-secondary education and a credential if possible. And because we know that a post-secondary education improves the likelihood of finding employment and a successful career. But the second focus that we have through our department is to increase an awareness and understanding among all members of the campus community about the barriers often experienced by people living with disabilities and the options for enhancing accessibility in activities and all aspects of campus life for everyone. And this is an approach we've taken by collaborating with Hoon's Career Services area. So just a little bit of background. MacEwan is one of the post-secondary institutions in Alberta. We're a baccalaureate degree granting institution, and we also grant diplomas and certificates in various career programs. Many of our programs, including the degree programs, include field placements, practicum experiences, clinical experiences of the health field, or co-op work experiences. So many of the programs naturally build in opportunities for all students to develop employment readiness, employment skills, and to network with potential employers. With respect to services to students with disabilities, I'll just refer to us as SSD from now on to save the mouthful. We are one team or one unit within student services at the university. And students may identify to our department that they are experiencing barriers related to a disability and look for supports or resources from us. This year we're approaching having about 750 students who are registered with our department, having approached us for assistance. And the students apply to and get accepted to post-secondary programs in the same way that all students apply to university. If they require accommodations as part of the application process, they would ask for that, and we're often play a role in supporting that happening. And our main work directly with students in terms of service that we offer to students is to facilitate full participation. And if it's necessary, if the student finds any aspects of the learning environment inaccessible or posing barriers to their full participation, then we may recommend accommodations or facilitate discussions with their faculty, teaching faculty, or other members of the community as to the ways that barriers can be eliminated or minimized in terms of impact on the students. The other role that we play is because post-secondary students are often young when they're coming to us, and so they're in the early stages of identity development and often haven't fully integrated their identity. So we have an opportunity to support them in doing that through developing good self-awareness that might include related to their disability and advocating for themselves as an individual with a disability. But we're also providing resources and services such as print materials, audiovisual materials in an alternate format, if that happens to be a barrier, or access to technology that might facilitate greater independence and ability to participate fully. So we're playing an active role to teach students how to access resources like that, and we try to put as many of them physically in the students' hands, so by the time they graduate, they are taking those tools with them to the workplace. In terms of collaboration with partners within the institution, we really are speaking more and more strongly about how important it is that for the entire institution to share responsibility for accessibility for all learners, including students with disabilities. So we provide consultation, information, guidance, advice, resources to the broader university community about facilitating full accessibility. So that the very obvious approach has been historically we were often consulted when it came to matters of facilities design. And I rarely am consulted on that matter anymore because it's become ingrained that that's something that we just naturally do. And it's rare that a person comes to me to say, I don't have physical access to a part of the university. So I feel like that's a good accomplishment, but it's a symbolic of where we need to still go with respect to learning. So we're now putting more of our energy into encouraging teaching and faculty to incorporate the principles of universal design in their instructional methods. This has potential to make their classes more inclusive and accessible to all learners, including students with disabilities, but those changes will go beyond. The benefits will go beyond to many other students. And when it comes to the service areas, we've played this role in terms of working with our colleagues in student services, such as residents and career services, in sharing information about the experience that students with disabilities share with us. We nearly always bring students along with us because we think they are the best people to describe what their experience is, and use those as opportunities to brainstorm around how the services can all be more accessible and less likely to need access to a specialized unit such as services to students with disabilities. We're looking to create a more welcoming, inviting, accessible world. If a student spoke to me about where do I go to get help with getting employment, we would start by recommending that they access career services just as any student would do. And this is, I think, sort of sharing the Inclusion Alberta's focus on trying to create normative experiences for students. And I know that Career Services team, they've all had some training with us, they've attended workshops on employment for people with disabilities, so they are relatively well prepared to provide their service to students. In the event that a particular student may find that that's not sufficient in terms of resources, then we would work together to refer the student to one of the very qualified community agencies that can provide more individualized support. And there's another resource that's we often recommend for students, post-secondary students with disabilities, and that is through the National Education Association of Disabled Students. It's called NEADS, NEADS.ca, and they have developed and they deliver employment workshops across the country for post-secondary students with disabilities. And so whenever they are in Alberta, be it it's usually Edmonton or Calgary, and they have visited approximately every 3 to 4 years, we make sure that all of our students know about the opportunity to go to their workshops.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Abigail. So I'll talk today maybe first about the services that we offer. So the services we offer to all students, and then maybe a little bit more about our philosophy or our approach and how we're trying to meet needs of students with disability. So in terms of services, I would say 4 major area of services. The first one is, we call it a job board, but it's actually we include some volunteer internship opportunities on there as well. Our focus for the board is to try to identify opportunities that we think are building skills or experience that are really relevant to the programs that we offer. So every single opportunity before it show up on our board has to be reviewed and approved by somebody in our office. The second thing that we do is our events. So we try to do recruitment fairs, so career fairs, job fairs, summer job fairs. We try to host networking events, speaker panels, kind of all throughout the year for students. To do this, we try to work with usually program areas or maybe a specific student clubs to try and identify more unique needs depending on maybe specific industries or specific program or students of a particular group so that we host an event that would meet those needs. We usually have 2 big goals when we try to create events. The first one is kind of education. So we want to educate students on what are the possible options or career paths or how to prepare themselves for graduate employment when they're still a student. So usually gaining experience, volunteering, paid work experience, summer job, that kind of stuff. And the other goal with these events are to help students with building their network, right? So lots of students, depending on the industry they want to go into, might not have that network through their existing personal network. So it's another way for them to connect with professionals who are working in the field that they're interested in. One of our biggest and probably most often accessed services are advising services. So these are one-on-one advising services that we provide to all current students and our alumni for up to 2 years after they graduate from a McEwen program. So they can have one-on-one appointment with our advisor on topics like career planning, job search strategies, resume and cover letter writing, LinkedIn profile review, LinkedIn best practices, networking, interview prep, those kinds of stuff. And then the last one, which we just launched just about a year, almost 2 years ago, are career assessments. So we offer psychological assessment like the MBTI or the Strong Interest Inventory, again to help students who maybe start in a program and then realize not quite the right fit for them, but then don't know what else to go into, or they might start in general studies or BA and kind of feeling a little bit lost and need a little bit more direction. That could be another service for them as well. So in terms of our philosophy, I think as a team, we try to treat every individual that comes to us as somebody who's unique, as somebody who has unique interests, unique history, unique needs. And so we try to work with that individual. In the appointment, there's usually about the first 10, 15 minutes of getting to know you, getting to know your history, what are you about, what are you struggling with, what are the potential barriers that you're dealing with. So in that sense, we actually don't have a specific list of services only for students with disability or only for newcomers or only for students who are going through gender transformation process or anything like that. We just try and treat them as an individual with unique needs. The second thing we try to do is we try to make our resources and services accessible. So if we're creating videos, making sure we have caption, if we're developing resources or going into classroom to do workshops, are we making sure all of our formats and materials and stuff like that are accessible to people. The other thing that we have started to implement and actually have helped us a lot, which is something that Abigail suggested, is that when the students book an appointment, they fill out a little small form, and on the form we'll ask, do you require any disability-related accommodations? So this could be about the employment process itself, or maybe sometimes they just need some accommodation in the appointment itself. So if the student is visually impaired, maybe our advisor need to approach the appointment a little bit differently. And then it's totally up to the individual to decide whether they want to disclose it or not. The other thing that we do is there's a peer mentoring theme kind of happening throughout today. So in our office, we hire students, current students, to act as peer advisor in our office. So we train them on how to help other students with basic things like resume writing, cover letter, how to search for jobs, interview prep, LinkedIn, that kind of things. And it's actually has worked really well. It's kind of the same thing that Tom was talking about, things that we can try and say over and over again, but when it comes from a peer, somehow it just makes a lot more sense, just a little bit easier to digest and take in. So every year we hire a new peer advisor, and we go through training with them. And we always invite Abigail's office to come. She'll talk to our students about numbers of students on campus that we have, the type of disabilities, and I mean the biggest thing is most of them are invisible disabilities. We talk about what is disabilities. We talk about kind of the experience. So Abigail would usually bring a couple of students along, share their experience with just attending MacEwan as a students, and then any kind of employment related kind of experience. And the main thing we try to do is empower our peer advisor to not be terrified of approaching that topic with somebody in their office, because I think sometimes if a person haven't had any personal exposure in their life, that could be a really sensitive, and they're like don't know how to bring it up, they don't know the language to talk about it. So we try to make sure that they feel prepared to have that conversation with an individual should the individual sitting across from them has a disability. Our team also went to, a couple years ago, the NEEDS, the National Educational Association of Disabled Students. They host, I believe it's a half-day training for service provider on how to help students with disabilities. So we went to that, and that was very helpful as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of about it in terms of our approach.
I have a couple.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions for you. First one is, do you find students hesitate to talk about their disability with an employer? And do you coach your students who are going in an interview setting or been offered a job how to disclose it?
Yeah, that varies quite a bit based on the individual, and we try to empower them with options. So we talk about at what point could you disclose or could you bring up that topic? How could you potentially bring that up? So some individual might feel confident to do that in the cover letter. Some might choose to do it just before the interview because maybe they need access to the place of the interview, so they choose to disclose it then, or some might choose to do it after the offer has been made. So we try to make sure they're aware of all their options and how to do so, just so that they can feel they can make an informed decision, but it's ultimately their decision is what we always say.
Okay, thank you. Jackie's question is wondering if you do you help determine if a special needs student's even capable of attending a 2 to 4 year college post-secondary program?
We would encourage anybody who's interested in attending a program at MacEwan University, and if they're not sure, to maybe come and visit one of us, and we can talk about admission requirements. That I wouldn't recommend someone to make a decision based on whether they have a disability or not. It would be more based on what are the admission requirements to the program, but really even more importantly, what are their interests, their career interests and passions. And I know not every person is eligible for admission to post-secondary, and that's regardless of disability. But even if that is the situation, a person's not eligible now, it doesn't mean they can't become eligible, and we can provide information about options for doing that if that's what they really want to do. I really do believe that in Alberta there are lots of opportunities, whether you've come through the high school system in the typical way or not. There's lots of opportunities for people who haven't, for whatever reason, to find a path into the post-secondary system if that's what they really want to do.
Wonderful. That's all for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abigail and Hui and Huang. So big thank you to all of our guests today, Trish, Wendy, Huang, Abigail, for generously sharing your experiences and insight with us today. And to all of you who tune in to this session, we're grateful you spent the hour with us. We hope it's been informative and inspiring. As you may know, this is the last webcast for the 2014-15 season of the Employment First Learning Series. However, you can still tune in to the FASD Learning Series, which helps individuals with FASD, their caregivers, and support workers learn more about FASD and how to support a person with FASD. The next session is on May 20th at 9 a.m. The topic is What's New in FASD Research. To learn more, go to fasd.alberta.ca. As mentioned, today's webcast was recorded and the video will be posted online along with videos from all of the previous webcasts. The video link will be sent out to all of our registrants in the near future. We encourage you to share this video with anyone you think may be interested. For all registered participants, we will send you a brief evaluation on today's webcast. Please send us your feedback and topic ideas if you'd like us to pursue that. Or email us at hs.employmentfirst@gob.ab.ca and let us know. We'd love to hear your ideas. Thank you again and have a wonderful afternoon.